so lovely, so sweet. Yeah, I need it from you. Got my hands all on you, sweet. Everything I want is sugar like yes, please. Love is like candy. Sweet. Yeah, I need it from you. Got my hands all on you, sweet. Everything I want is sugar like yes, please. Love is like candy. Sweet. Yeah, I need it from you. Got my hands all on you, sweet. Everything I want is sugar like yes, please. Love is like candy. Sweet. Yeah, I need it from you. Got my hands all on you, sweet. Everything I want is sugar like yes, please. Love is like candy.
Welcome to the Ken McElroy Show. I'm your host, Danille, here with Ken.
What's going on, guys?
I know it looks like we're in an interrogation room, but I swear we're in a nice house in Manhattan Beach. We're just trying to correct the lighting in here and the internet connection.
Yeah, we actually have a view of the beach back here, but apparently there's too much light coming in. So I was trying to give you guys a view, but we had to shut it down per our lighting guys.
Exactly. So we had a fun weekend.
We did. We had the volleyball, the pro volleyball, the AVP is in town. So it was fun to see the number one ranked volleyball, two-man volleyball players and two women volleyball players in the world here. The people that won the gold medal. And so it was fun to see the talent and the caliber of that sport and see it live. And they're tall and they're in incredible shape. And they can, I don't know if you guys know how hard it is to jump in the sand, but it looks effortless to them.
Yeah, I felt very short this weekend.
Yeah.
That is for sure.
Yeah, we went to a bar called Shellbacks, which is right off of the beach. And I think everyone in there was over 6 foot.
Yeah, including the girls.
Yeah, for sure. Some of them like high 6 foot.
Yeah. So that was very, very fun.
That was a blast. Yep.
So we have a lot going on kind of in the news this week. You know, we have obviously Afghanistan, which terrible what's going on over there.
Yep.
Then we have the rental moratorium. The federal judge is having the Biden administration submit their information as to why they feel it's legal, and that's actually due today. So we just have a lot going on, so we have to wait and see how all those things play out. Yeah,
well, I will tell you one thing, guys. If you guys know, I've been talking about affordable housing, and I've been talking about the need for housing. Well, these folks that were pulling out of Afghanistan, they're going to need housing. So, all this stuff, the open border, obviously, and I know I'm not trying to be political here. What I'm trying to tell you is that there's just going to be additional pressure on more housing needed from all of this stuff, I think. And it's going to be, if you guys can figure out an affordable housing opportunity or play, you're going to be on the right side of this. Trust me, there's not enough housing for the people.
Exactly. And more people keep coming in. Yeah. So that is definitely going to be a definite talking point. I wanted to give a shout out to M. Paulino. We appreciated the jokes when we were waiting for the countdown. So that did make us laugh.
Yeah, I saw that.
So, today we're going to be chatting about mistakes investors make. So there are certain things that people that are new and sometimes people that aren't so new, mistakes that they make when they purchase their first rental or when they're managing their first rental. And we thought that would be really helpful for everybody out there.
Yeah, but before we jump in, I think when I first started in this business, I really believed in my heart that I needed the money in the bank or some rich person to be able to fund whatever I was going to do next. And for me, that was my number one mistake. Now, I understand how life generally works. Typically, you have to have the money before you go out and buy something. But what I want you to really wrap your head around is that there's a lot of people with a lot of money right now looking for good investments. So if you can find a good investment through knowledge, through education, and then bring that to the person, it'll get funded. So and it's the opposite of the way you all probably grew up, which was just like me, save your money, then go buy something. So this is a little bit different where if you find the opportunity, I guarantee you'll find the money to be able to buy it. But because there's a lot more people looking for real estate, and there's a lot more money sitting out there on the sidelines right now looking for a good real estate deal.
Exactly. And make sure you guys slam that like button. It really does help us out. It makes us able to keep creating this free content for you. So we're already getting a lot of questions on YouTube of, is Milwaukee a good area? Is Ohio a good area? Is, parts of California a good area? And just, guys, we always tell you, anywhere can be a good area if you find a cash flowing deal.
Yeah, and it's a tough question, but I totally understand. I mean, everybody wants to know definitively, and they're, those are all areas that I've been to, but it's a very, very tough question, and it actually cannot be answered correctly because, is Ohio a good area? That's a rough question.
But even Milwaukee, which is smaller, I mean, that's still a huge area.
Right. Well, one's a state, one's a city. But the point is, again, there's different areas. Real estate is super submarket driven. As you guys know, you're going to have some submarkets that have military bases, college universities. They're going to have high employment. They're going to have one major employer in an area. Maybe it's a tourism area in one area of town. And the other area of town can be very, very different. So, the demand for an area and the pricing for an area, even a town like Milwaukee, can be very, very different from north to south to east to west. So it really is a submarket by submarket question, which it actually makes it easier if you think about it, because you have less data to consider. When you're looking at more data, there's actually more that can go wrong. So if you're looking at a sub-market, let's say, obviously I live in Scottsdale. So if you're looking at the Scottsdale sub-market, it's easier to wrap your head around, like, what employers are there, what's the population growth there, what's the development there, what's the additional supply there, what is the pricing, what are rents doing, what have they done in Scottsdale, which of course is very different from Tucson, which is 2 hours away, but they're both in Arizona.
And then Scottsdale is different too. Like north Scottsdale is very different than South Scottsdale as far as rental returns, cost of property, if somebody is going to want to live there. That's all different too.
Yeah, just as an example, if you were to buy a home in South Scottsdale, it would probably be around $600,000. If you were to take that same home up into North Scottsdale, it'd probably be closer to $1 million.
Right. So, and most importantly too, is that it cash flows. So, I mean, anybody could find a deal in any area that is a good deal.
Yeah. And that's kind of the point here. And so again, going back to kind of the original thing, if you're finding a property that cash flows, and you can find cash flowing deals, even here in Manhattan Beach, where we are right now, there are people that are paying big, big rent. I was talking to a guy the other night. Now, this is tough to wrap your head around, but he was charging in a home that he owned $40,000 for the month.
Yeah.
For 1 month. Now, that's absurd. Obviously, it's a short-term situation, but that's what he's getting right now for the month of August for a place that he owns.
And that could or could not be a good deal depending on what he paid for it.
Yeah, clearly, right?
Bill, thanks for slamming the like button. We really appreciate it. He just wrote in that he slammed the like button.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Bill.
TM Guinness was asking about Manhattan Beach. And yeah, there's good deals here too. It's just all relevant.
They're tough to find. I'm not going to lie. But what happens in a market like this, guys, is the service workers, just like you're going to start to see in other areas, have a hell of a time trying to find a place to live. Obviously, if you're making, let's say, low 20 per hour, it's very, very difficult to live in a rental community in a place like Manhattan Beach, where you're certainly in the millions on almost every single house in this particular market.
Yeah, and Rafi Zoo says in Arizona there's not going to be any water next year, and I think he's been watching too much CNN.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, but it is something to consider. I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, if you really dig into the treaty, there's a treaty that goes back to the Colorado River. If you really want to dial
Well,
in.
CNN just was reporting the Colorado River is going to dry up. So that's what I was saying.
That's funny. Well, just to let you know, the Arizona sells water to California and to Nevada as part of the original treaty from the late 20s. So I think Arizona is going to be fine.
Yeah. So let's jump into some of these mistakes that you see investors making all across the board.
I see a lot, guys. And so this is interesting. What I find is that sometimes it depends on the people's motivations a lot of times. So right now, there's a lot of people that are trying to keep the lights on and they're trying to, get fees. And so I find a lot of real estate transaction happening where it's more fee driven instead of investor and money driven. So that's a big, big problem. You got to stick with your guns on the returns if you're going to be a long-term real estate investor. Otherwise, you're not going to have, if it's your money or an investor's money, if this is a long-term business for you, then you need to stick to that return. That's the number one thing.
Okay.
Stick to that. Make sure
when you say
flows.
that, do you mean you're not going to try to sell it?
Well, what I mean is, if you're trying to buy low and sell high, that's, in my opinion, it's not prudent investing because the markets do go up and they do go down. And so you're better off to make sure that it cash flows, which is income minus expenses minus debt, cash flow. So the cash flow then is used to calculate your return. So if you put $100,000 down on something and you're getting $10,000 a year in cash flow, that's a 10% cash on cash return. So it all backs into that. Then hopefully that property appreciates for you over time. Your tenant's obviously going to be paying down the mortgage. That's good for you. You're going to have some tax benefits. That's good for you. And then hopefully you've bought a property that's appreciated over time. Even I have bought properties that have gone down after I've bought them. And so don't ever let anybody believe you that's been in the real estate game for any length of time that hasn't happened. Now, the interesting thing is if you're new to the game, like 7 or 8 years, you probably haven't had that problem. But, if you've been around for 20, 30 years, like a lot of the seasoned investors, I can assure you that they've been through some highs and some lows. And so you need that cash flow to cover you're not trying to time the market and take advantage of that capital gain. The one thing that wipes out all flippers and all syndicators that are focused on this capital gain strategy is a market downturn.
So I think that you skipped the actual mistake that investors make.
Which is what?
So
I probably
if you guys are a little lost, so the mistake that investors make is that they buy and expect their property to increase in value. So that is the mistake.
Thank you for simplifying that for me. That is so true.
So that is the mistake.
Yeah.
And then to Ken's point, that's why it needs to cash flow.
Now, I'm not saying to discount that. You have to actually want that too, but don't bank on it as the investment strategy.
Right, because some people buy low on a non-cash flowing deal and assume, hey, I'm going to flip it or I'm going to hold it and then it's going to go up and I'm going to make money.
Yeah.
And that's a bad strategy.
Right. So the number one thing is the cash flow. And so what you really want if you're investing and you're trying to put a renter in there is to be able to cover all your expenses and have the renter pay off all your expenses. That's the whole idea around this. And then hopefully you picked a market where you're going to have some rent growth moving forward. And as you guys know, actually this week I'm filming something, about Renter Nation and talking about where I think rents are going to be going. I really feel strongly about this. I really, really, really believe that we're going to have some serious affordability issues around rents, and cities and states, and even potential federal involvement is going to happen at some 2, 3, 4 year mark would be my guess, because there's crazy stories right now with people raising rents.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're raising rents, but property taxes are going to go up. Jing had just mentioned on YouTube that he's seeing some insurance increases. So everything's going up, and it's predominantly due to inflation. And so rents have to go up. And that's why we love rents, is because they move with inflation.
But they are moving because of that, for sure. But they're also moving because, guys, people are moving into rental housing right now. And there's a lot of, the occupancies are high right now because there's more people than there is product. So one of my friends sent me a text last week, and her daughter, they're a couple that I've known a long time, and their daughter is at Arizona State University. And she said, Ken, can you help? Their daughter's rent went up $700
Right.
on a renewal.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine $700 a month. And that's a lot. And she said, is there anything in the lease that prevents that? And unfortunately, there is not. At the end of the lease, the landlord can do what they want to do. And so some people are jacking rents significantly over, but they obviously can't raise them above market. And so the point here is, I think you're going to start to see, we're certainly seeing it on our properties that we own at MC Companies, and we're actually taking a look at how aggressive do we want to be on our rents, because there's more renters than there are rental units right now, at least in the markets that we're in.
Exactly. So that brings us to mistake number 2 that a lot of landlords make or investors make, and that is doing a lease beyond 1 year.
Yeah, so
in a time of rental increase.
So here's kind of the general rule of thumb when it comes to this. In a declining market, so a declining market would be maybe a lot of home buying, which we just saw, or obviously a rental moratorium, where you basically can't put people out that owe you rent. So you would probably want to do longer term leases, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to keep the people in your units. That's in a declining market.
Right. So if the rents aren't going up,
yeah,
and they're going down.
If the rents are flat, or there's concessions, let's say, 1 month free on a 12-month lease as an example, or 100 off or 200 off. A lot of new construction projects will do this. And you're going to want to get a longer, they're going to want to lock you in. Okay. When rents are going up, you want, as a landlord, you want the opposite. You want the flexibility to maybe 6-month leases. Mm-hmm. So you want the ability to be able to raise that rent in 7 months and not necessarily in the 13th month. So you got to be thinking of your lease, depending on which side of the equation you're on. If you're a renter, you're going to want to lock in long-term rent leases right now and hedge your rent through this period of time. But then you need to brace yourself for what could potentially be an increase at the end. If you're a landlord, you're going to probably err toward a shorter term lease, because you're going to want to take a look at what rents have done in the 6-month period, and you're going to want to slowly keep up on the adjustments. Instead of $100 at the end of a 12-month lease, you might do a $50 increase at the end of 6 months, and then maybe another $50. So you're slowly hedging it up instead of giving them one big rental increase. Because what happens, obviously, is renters leave. They seek affordability, and so we're going to be in the situation where landlords, I think you're going to start to see some real disruption, and people are going to have to move into areas that are a little bit more affordable. And what happens is people move. There's, in the category of rentals, we have what we call the A's, the B's, and the C's. The A's are typically, not always, something that is fairly new, newer, maybe even brand new. Those would be considered A's. The next one would be Bs, and those would be maybe something that was built maybe over 10 years ago, still really well located. And those are typically lower rents than the As. And then below that are the Cs, which might have been something that was built in the 70s or the 80s or something like that. So now, it doesn't mean that they're bad places. It just means that they're a little more dated. Maybe they have 8-foot ceilings. Maybe they have older appliances, whatever it might be. But typically, their locations are a little further out. So what you're going to see is you're going to see people moving into the Bs and then into the Cs, perhaps, to try to chase that same rent that they were paying last year and the year before. And so that's what's going to happen as we start to see these rents go up, is there'll be some people that pay it and other people that will say, you know what, I'm going to save $300 or $400 and move, 5-6 miles away from where I'm working or from this area to try to maintain my lifestyle. Because one thing that's not happening is wage growth is not matching rent increases. And so the renters are going to be stuck in this situation where they're going to have to eat that, and they haven't made that in additional income.
But for the investors, because that's the mistake, is that if they're not going to be raising the rent, then that's going to be they're going to not want to do the 2-year lease because they're going to want to be able to raise that rent. So as an investor, make sure you don't make that mistake.
Yeah. You want to, as an investor, you're going to want to make sure that at the end of that 2-year lease, if you do a 2-year lease, that you're not $200, $300, $400, even $500 under what the market is at the time.
Yep, definitely. And John from YouTube was saying he's been seeing it in his search for college housing and that it's insane right now. So another mistake that investors make is they buy in a bad area to save some money.
Yeah, so this happens all the time. So those of you that are cheap, and you know who you are, I get this. I do. I've made these mistakes. You buy on the edge of town. Maybe it's an area that a lot of renters don't want to be in. There could be some potential crime issues there. You guys know what I'm talking about. And so what happens is those areas are obviously repriced differently than areas that are kind of in the core, that are more desirable. And so what I found, and I get this, people, what they do is they go to the edge of town or they go somewhere and they try to make it work. They ignore, they look at the price and they're like, this is all I could afford. And I get that. But just know that in a lot of cases, the management problems in the area don't go away just because you bought there. What I like to tell everybody is, don't try to be a pioneer. Don't try to, you're not going to change the market. And I'll give you an interesting example. So there was a time where it was the political move, but the mayor of Phoenix designated 10 landlords to be, slumlords. And so he had the slumlord bill. And it came out and they kind of targeted 10 properties. And you know what? These landlords deserved it. They were not managing their properties well, et cetera. So I went and met with them and I said, listen, I'll buy all of them. I'm going to go, to buy all of these for, pennies on the dollar, and I'll fix them all with management. And so I went to them. And what I found was that they were all in areas that had other properties just like it. So there was gang activity, there was drug activity, and new money and new management does not fix that. And so I had to go back to them and kind of eat my words and say, listen, like this entire block or this entire 2 blocks is a mess. And you've got all kinds of properties around it. So what happens is, like attracts like. And so be careful. You can't manage your way out of a bad neighborhood. And you can't throw extra money at something that's in a bad neighborhood. So now, doesn't mean that cheap doesn't necessarily mean it's in a bad neighborhood.
I was going to say, it's not necessarily in a bad neighborhood, because we were having some comments there, and I don't think that it necessarily
it doesn't
means
necessarily,
that.
But a lot of people ignore that.
Yeah.
So, they immediately go to an area because it's typically less. And so you can certainly buy well, but make sure that the demand is there.
Yeah, I mean, even, if it's not by the city center, say that you're like, there's houses that are 10 minutes from the city center, but yet there's cheaper houses that are 30 minutes from the city center. That 30 minutes is going to be a major decrease in rent, but it's also going to be less expensive, but you're also going to have more vacancy the farther you are from where people want to live.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, obviously, if you can find that jewel, that affordable place 30 minutes away, it happens all over the place. So I invested in an area outside of Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which is, they say in Jackson Hole that the billionaires are pushing the millionaires out. But one thing is for sure, that there's no housing for the service workers. So all the people that work there, during the day and support the entire economy, the majority, they can't live in Jackson Hole. So what they do is they spill over into these little other towns. So I invested in a town near in that area, and it's done very well because that's where people go. So it was significantly less than Jackson Hole, and to your point, it was about 30 minutes away.
Yeah. So it just depends.
Happens all the time.
But you just want to make sure that you're not trying to be cheap, and then you're not going to be able to run it
That's right.
easily.
Yeah.
Now, Carrie on YouTube said, would you ever invest in a place that you're breaking even on and not cash flowing? But we're going to kind of get to that next with mistakes investors make. So another mistake that investors make is they assume that they're never going to have a vacancy when they run their numbers.
Yeah, so this kind of is a good question.
Yeah.
It's good timing. So if there was what I would call a forced equity component, I might do it. If there was an opportunity to grow rents over a period of time, I might do it. So in other words, I have no problem buying something that breaks even or even is a little negative in the first year, if it has some tremendous upside. In fact, that's basically what I do full time. Is the properties that we bought recently in Houston, both had high vacancies. They were poorly run, and we're upgrading the units, and we're going to be able to get proven rents, not based on future projections, but based on the current. So in other words, we had dated units in a market that supported higher rents in the market. So all we had to do was upgrade the units, and then we were going to get a higher rent. So in that scenario, I have no problem with buying break even. I have no problem at all.
But you have a plan, because sometimes I think that investors make the mistake of buying and then assuming that the rents are going to go up.
Yeah, and what you asked was the vacancy piece. So I guarantee you, people, that people move in, people move out. There's going to be lag on when they move in. There's going to be lag on getting your units painted and cleaned and renting them, and you're going to have vacancy unless you're in some kind of a market that's just completely remarkable, and those are far and few between. So you have to underwrite some vacancy in there, and then you're better off. Obviously, if there isn't any, but we always underwrite a nice vacancy. We also underwrite rent growth. So on the other side of that, again, if you're buying something and the average rents are say $1,000, but the market is $1,200, we would probably do something like that, because then that you can push rents gently and slowly in the market up to say $1,200 if the data supports it. So buying something that's break even is not a bad idea if your rents, there's potential rent growth, if you've added some vacancy, and if you've underwritten the expenses correctly, and if you've got a fixed rate debt, because variable debt can also eat away at your cash flow as well.
Right. And so we're going to go into a few things. So what you have to realize, if you're breaking even, then any cost of the property or vacancy, you're going to have to cover, and you're not going to have any cash flow to cover that. So some people can or cannot afford that. So
yep, I've had a ton of horror stories on this, guys, where people have bought properties and then the cities come in and said, I need you to do this work. I need you to put an extra parking space in. I need you to do this. an air conditioner goes out, and you guys know those are $3, $4, $5,000.
A roof repair.
Yeah. Typically, roofs are easier to spot, but that's another one. I just bought a place, and the roof was shot. It had water damage actually inside the unit. And I knew that we were going to require a new roof, so I made it part of the initial purchase. So if you're going in thinking there's not going to be any capital work, it could be code violations, it could be upgrades, it could be things that break while your tenants are there. It could be actually something that happens on the insurance side, water damage, fire, all that stuff, in which there's deductibles. And sometimes, depending on the policy can pay it all or not pay it all. You have to come out of pocket. So you want reserves, and you want some wiggle room whenever you do anything like this.
And yes, and then that actually goes to our next point. Your mistake investor make is assuming that you're not going to have major or minor repairs. So if you're kind of basing your cash flow, or you're not cash flowing off the fact that everything's going to go great, you're never going to have to fix anything, it's going to be wonderful, that's just not how it's going to work.
Let's talk about your renters.
Oh my God.
Okay, I just have to sit here and laugh because she did this, and she has one renter that I think they call you every 2 weeks.
Yeah, they do, and so, they need a handyman for this, or they need a handyman for that, or, different things. I mean, the air conditioning, legit things too. Like, I had the air go out in one of my units. That was like $4,000. And then another one, the water heater went out, and that wasn't too expensive. It was $500. I had a stove not working. That was $500. But I can pay for all that because I cash flow. So it basically comes out of the cash flow. It affects the cash flow, but these are big things. So if I'm not cash flowing and now I have a $4,000 air conditioner repair, I either have to pull it from my savings account, or I have to put it on a credit card, or whatever you guys would have to do. But that is the risk of not investing in cash flowing properties, is you have to cover all the things that happen. It just
that's
is.
the law. The law is that they have to be habitable. So, again, buying something that just cash flows is not a bad strategy, as long as you have reserves. You understand that things will go wrong. Tenants will call you. What do you have? You have 3 tenants now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they're all very different.
Very different.
Some people don't call her at all.
Ever.
Some people call her all the time. Doesn't matter what age they are.
It just
is.
depends.
Yeah, it's just, and you had a pest control issue the other day with a hornet's nest.
My that tenant decided they were just going to fix that on their own.
Okay.
Yeah. Which they told me after, oh, never mind. We went and blasted it or whatever. And well, that's an insurance issue, but I'm like, it's fine. I'm glad everyone survived. It was a hornet's nest. So, so you're going to have all different kinds of tenants, and you're going to have all different kinds of issues, but to just not take into account those expenses you're going to have when you buy a property is a mistake.
Right.
Another mistake that I thought of, and I just thought of it, it wasn't even in our notes, but when we were here, is being underinsured, having your property underinsured.
Yeah. So, property insurance is not as easy as just like a car insurance policy. So for those of you who have had car insurance policies and you've ever been in an accident, you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes you have other drivers that don't have insurance. Sometimes you're underinsured. You're typically fighting with the adjusters on things that you think are covered. They want to send you to someplace and buy all or re-engineered parts and all this kind of stuff. So there's all these things that go on the property side too, where the adjusters are always trying to mitigate their losses and interpret the policies. So I've had a lot of experience around this. I'm no insurance expert, but one of the things that you need to make sure of is that you have adequate coverage for all kinds of things that can go wrong inside of the units. The number one thing that I would suggest that's helped us a lot is that we require now, and we did this about 5-6 years ago, all of our residents actually have to get renter's insurance on them and on the contents and things that can happen. So there's almost like a co-insurance. So we're insured, but they're insured too. And so we've been able to rely on their own insurance policy on a lot of things that might have happened inside of their unit. And sometimes it's not their fault. So we've had issues where there's been a bathtub overflow, or somebody left, maybe a toilet was leaking from inside the wall, and it comes down into the unit below and ruins things in the unit below. And so obviously now you have a tenant that's upset because their things have been ruined, and there could be mold issues and all kinds of other issues. And so having the right kind of insurance is very, very important. Make sure that you guys really understand what's covered, what isn't covered. And make sure that you understand. You want to look at the fire, you want to look at wind, you want to look at flood, you want to look at all of those things, because those are all things that have happened to me, things that will happen to you, unfortunately, as you have people moving in and out of these places.
Well, and the truth is that your insurance person is wanting you to switch over or buy their policy. So they give you, like, a lot of times the lowest amount so that you feel like you're getting a good deal. The problem is that it's not enough insurance. So for example, on my condo, they had the replacement cost at $60,000. If like the whole thing burned down, and granted the insurance company, the condo policy would rebuild the structure, but the interior, everything, $60,000. That would not be enough.
That's not enough.
So I would then be stuck with probably a $40,000, $50,000 bill to get everything back to where it was. But the increase in insurance to get that was like another $40 a year.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
That's
So it's
so
not
surprising.
a big jump.
That's actually what's so surprising. So we have this, we're always fighting when we have a fire or a flood, and we have, unfortunately, we have a number of them going at all times. One of the things that we're always fighting is the rent loss. So as a landlord, if let's say there's a kitchen fire and the people have to move out, which is very common, and so you have contractors in there fixing all that stuff. Well, that could take a month, 2 months, just depends. And if there's no fire investigation, because sometimes we've had it spread to 12, 16, 20 units, and now you've got people moving out. Now you're fighting with the insurance company because you still have a mortgage, by the way, guys. You still have to pay your property taxes. Those don't stop. So when your revenue stops and now you're trying to rebuild a unit, that's when all the stuff becomes really, really important. So that the rent loss piece and being able to be paid for that while that's being fixed, because those people are going to be long gone. They're probably not going to move back in. They're going to move out, and you're going to have to fix it and re-rent it again. And so you want to be paid for that, as an example. So if it takes 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, in some cases it's taken us a lot longer than that for a variety of reasons. You're losing $1,000 a month. It starts to add up, and you still have your mortgage. So there's a lot of things on the insurance policy that you really, really need to make sure of. And so I would, if you remember one thing from this live today, is dig into your insurance policy, make sure you're properly insured, ask a lot of those tough questions. Go on the internet. There's a tremendous amount of great information on there that you can get prepared for when you ask your agent. Typically, the agents are the salespeople. And they oftentimes don't always know what's covered and what isn't covered because they're salespeople. So you want to dig into that policy.
Well, and use your common sense, like think about it. Think about how much it costs to, repair something or remodel something, and then look at your policy and be like, does this seem reasonable? And Ralph says, smash the like button. So go ahead and do that as well. Thanks, Ralph.
Yeah, thank you.
So the last one I want to get into is assuming you won't have tenant issues. So I want you all on YouTube, if you've had a good tenant issue, please let us know. I'll be reading these comments.
We should do a whole show on that.
We should do a whole show
that would
on
actually be good. If you guys put some good stuff out there, let's have some fun. Let's talk about some of these tenants, because actually I should go to our property management group.
You totally should.
There's some funny stuff out there. And that's the way you have to look at it, guys.
Well, I was talking to my girlfriend. She's thinking about renting out her place because she's getting married or whatever. And, she's putting together, her friend's going to move in. And I said, oh, do you need help with a lease? I have a good lease for you, whatever. Oh, I think it's fine. We've kind of talked about it and da 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 da. And I'm just thinking, oh no, that is never a good start. So I think a lot of people just, especially when they first, not ongoingly, because once you start to have tenant issues, you don't trust your tenants anymore. But at the beginning, a lot of investors, property owners make the mistake of trusting tenants and thinking everything will be great.
Well, first of all, let me say, we have fabulous renters living in our properties. And I mean that, like we're talking about, the few percent. Most of the people pay on time. They're great tenants. They treat the place great. But what happens is there is a percentage that don't. And so some of this can be mitigated on the front end by who you allow in, and just by asking them to fill out an application for a rental, you can weed out a lot of problems. Just say, I want all your information. I don't understand why you would ever have a big investment like this and just let anybody move in. So, you want the basic information on the people. You want to tell them that you're going to run a criminal and a credit background check. And then we run a sex offender check too, because, you can. And they have to register state by state. And obviously, if you have a sex offender move in to one of your units, it's going to affect the neighborhood for sure, because by law, they have to notify that there's a sex offender in the neighborhood. So those are the things that we do.
Yeah, and that's a really big issue. And something else to be mindful of is you may have a great tenant that you've vetted and you love and they're doing great, and then they start dating somebody or get a roommate, and that person moves in and everything goes sideways.
Trust me. Like, we've had so many issues with the student properties that we have. The students load up, right? And then you have parking issues, because you have 4 kids in a 2-bedroom and they have 4 cars, and then you have pet issues, and you have girlfriend and boyfriend issues, and you have roommates that quit school and leave, and you have others that, so there's people always trying to get on a lease, get out of a lease. They want to pay you, a quarter rent or half a rent, or, all that kind of stuff. So all of those things happen. And so Danille's right. You need to run a criminal credit background check on every single person, and you need to get them all on the lease, and you need to understand, do they have pets? Do they not have pets? It needs to be clear. How many cars do they have? It needs to be clear, especially if you have limited parking. And all of those things, what do they pay for? What don't they pay for? What does the landlord pay for? What are the deposits? What are the fees? All that stuff needs to be inside of the lease. We have a lot of this stuff on ken.com.
If you're a premium member.
Yeah. So go take a look, because we have leases and all these kinds of things on there. I have videos on this. It's really, really, really important that if you're moving someone in, that it's really crystal clear. Think about when you buy a car, all the paperwork that you fill out, that's a result of a zillion mistakes. So, that's why they're having you sign all that stuff. Everything's crystal clear. That's why the agreements just keep getting longer. When I first got in this business, they were like 2-sided leases. Now they're like 6 or 8 pages.
Yeah.
So, and you have move in, move out inspections and all that kind of stuff. Very, very important.
Yeah. And, just a story I had is I had this girl, and she was just a great tenant. She was with me for like 3 years. Then she started to date this guy. He moved in with his kids, and everything just went to hell after that. Like, it was just bad. Like, they smoked in the house, and there was all these issues, right? So, and I vetted him, right? But those kind of things can happen, And so it's really important to vet your people and the people that you're moving in and all of that stuff. And like you said, that it's very important that they're both on the lease, because they both need to be accountable for the lease.
Well, that's the biggest issue. One of the biggest issues is, they're in violation. If you can't just rent something and then move who you want into it. So you have to have them on the lease. And if there's what if they move and they leave the person in there that's not on the lease? As an example, that's happened. And so now you have somebody that you have no information on. and they're not even on the lease. You basically, and you have an old tenant move out. So there's all kinds of things that can happen. And that's why it's very, very important that you get all this buttoned up.
Because if they're both on the lease, they're both responsible for the payment. And Twanda said her tenant always pays late. So that's super annoying. As a landlord, what you learn to do is there are just fees for paying late. I do give my tenants 3 days, so I give them a 3-day grace period. But after that, there is fees every single day that they're late. You don't even have to give them a grace period, but it all has to be in the lease. You can't just make that up as you go. It has to be in the lease.
Right. So now here's the other side of it. There are, especially now with everything that's happening, there are people that are probably having some rent issues and that you might want to work with. But just as a general rule, what you want is a big, nice, healthy late fee. That could be $50, $75, $100. Some people I've heard have even more. And then you want so much per day. So maybe $5 a day, maybe $10 a day, or something like that. And you have to check your state law and make sure that you can do all those things. But what you want, just like you have in every single thing else, everything else, a car payment, a house payment, an insurance payment, doesn't matter. They all have kind of late fees associated. You have to have a hammer or a trigger to incentivize people to pay on time. If they don't pay on time, but they're paying every single month late, that actually can be okay, because now you're working with them, they're paying the late fees and all that kind of stuff. It's actually an extra source of revenue.
Yeah, if they pay late and you're charging them the late fees and they're okay with it, and
and they're okay with it,
it's fine.
That's one thing. They might as well move somewhere else and pay for a rental that's actually worth more, because they're giving it to you in the form of late fees. So there are exceptions, and and also just have some. We're trying to work with people. We're not trying to boot them out. And
no, but it's got to be fair on both sides, and you can't be too loose with everything, because they have to understand that paying the rent is a priority. It's owed, and there's a due date with it.
Yep.
And Nora made a good point on YouTube. She said you have to have a tight lease and you have to force the lease.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you guys aren't enforcing the lease, it's no different than anything else that you don't enforce. If anything's loose in your life, it typically has to do with the discipline of a lease. And so once the tenant knows that you're going to enforce late fees, once the tenant knows that you're going to be calling them, then they start to get more compliant. The minute that you allow them to pay a week late or 2 weeks late, obviously they're going to continue that behavior, just like you would in any other area of your life. It doesn't really matter.
Well, plus, I've even heard of judges kind of siding with the tenants when a landlord hasn't enforced the lease on other things, where the judge then says, well, you didn't really enforce the lease here, here, and here. So the tenant just didn't know that they had to vacate by this date or had to pay you your unpaid rent by this date, because you can't enforce it when you want and not enforce it when you want. So you really have to stick to it.
That's right. The tenant now has an opportunity to say, well, I paid late for 10 months and they were just fine. And so why now? So just be careful of that.
Yeah. And Jack says we are crushing it. So thank you,
good.
Jack.
Yeah. Thank you.
And we do have a handout for you guys, kenmcelroy.com/21 keys. In order to get your 21 keys to real estate investing, it's free. I think that if you're an investor that's starting out, you definitely should get that. Ken put that together just for you. So kenmcelroy.com/21 keys, and that is 21 keys. All right, let's move to some premium questions.
Right.
So we have a few good premium questions this week. So I want to start with Rickard. Rickard says in Sweden, so he's from Sweden. We should ask him how long the wait is on housing there. We've heard it's 9 years.
I heard it's a long time, yeah.
In Sweden, we learned that to calculate property value, you look at a 5-year NOI plus 6-year wholesale value. How does that compare to the way you calculate it in the States?
So we learned to calculate property value. You look at a 5-year NOI plus. I don't know how you value stuff 5 years out. I think trying to figure out what an NOI is for 5 years is very, very difficult. So let me explain first what NOI is. NOI is simply income minus expenses. So in the US, at least, we have income trickling up. We have vacancy going up and down. So a lot of times we don't know year to year, maybe 1 year, but the second year oftentimes can be a bit of a wild card. So you might have a big employer move out. You might have affordability issues where people are moving away, to affect the income. On the expense side, typically we have utility increases. Typically we have potential increases in the debt, depending on what kind of debt you have. Typically, we have property tax increases. Typically, there's payroll increases. Typically, there's cost of the management that typically increase. And oftentimes, we have marketing and advertising increases. And then not to mention the repairs and maintenance. So I know that the cost of let's say a water heater in year 1 is going to be different in year 6. So you've got all these things that are going to change year over year. So, I think the right way to do it is try to figure out what your year 1 NOI is, and then project what year 2 is. Now, when we do our business plans, we're projecting for 5 years. So what we're doing is we're always calculating cost of increase on the expense side, but also income rising. And if it's a value add or a forced equity, we're calculating all that in. So we always look at a deal for 5 years. But truth be told, it's pretty difficult to figure out really what's going to happen in 24 or 36 or 48 or 60 months.
Well, right. Are rents going to increase? Are they going to decrease? Is the dryer going to go up? Is inflation going to go up? So everything's going to go up in price. What
is there
what
going
your
to be another
vacancy is
lockdown?
going to be?
Like,
Yeah, there's going to be
is there going to be another lockdown?
Is there another virus?
Right,
like what's
so
going on?
There's a lot that can happen. So I'd be careful.
But and truthfully, you only really need to know year to year. There's really no reason to do a 5-year NOI. I mean, you should. I would imagine anywhere around the world. I mean, year to year with a projection of year 2, unless something crazy happened in year 1 that would make it,
calculating a 5-year NOI is, from a long-term investment strategy, something that you should do. Just know that, there's a lot that can happen. As we all know, we just went through this. We all saw what happened with this, with the virus and, all these things happening and the shutdowns and the lockdowns and the unemployment and, in the U.S., the eviction moratorium, all those things can come up. They can come up again. And so it's just hard to calculate something out more than, I would say, a year and a half to 2 years.
Exactly. So our next premium question comes from Vadim. So Vadim said that he found a property with really a good potential. And they need $4 million in cash, and he doesn't know how to finance it.
So this is common. So we'll see whether or not we're going to see more of these from banks. So think of it's a distressed 25 townhome. So somebody owns it. So you got to kind of start there. Is it an individual seller? Is it a developer? Probably not. It's probably a financial institution that had some kind of a loan against it. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to solve to that 4 million. They probably are trying to make a little money as well. So, but the goal here is to go all the way to the end. So what are the 25 fixed? What are they worth? So we've had this situation plenty of times where a distressed seller or a bank comes to us and says, we want to sell it for X. You can't really make a decision right then. What you have to do is take a look at the 25 townhomes and decide if you were to sell them all off or you're to rent them, whatever your strategy is, what are they worth today? Maybe they are worth 4. And I think the actual question is can you finance them?
Right. And I think a lot of people have this question, right? Because we get that a lot. Like, how do I finance this big payment?
Sure. So here's the situation. If it's a defaulted loan or a seller is trying to, and there's no cash flow, there's a reason they're distressed. So most people are going to shy away from any kind of a loan.
Yep.
it's going to be tough to finance, but you can. So this is where your private money and your hard money come in. Now, unfortunately, that's typically more expensive. So you're not going to get a buttoned up perfect loan for a distressed property. You're going to have to do what's called a bridge loan. That could be a 1 year, could be a 2 year loan at a low rate. And the collateral will be the property. So as an example, so you go find some hard money or private money and you say, we've got 25 townhomes. We think they're worth 5 million. Okay. We can buy it for 4. Now you've got their interest. So what you say is, I need to finance the 4, and here's the way I'm going to pay you back. But what they're going to do is they're going to have all the property as a collateral, and they're going to want to be paid on the money that they loan you. That could be in the form of debt or equity. So, and usually debt and equity are priced a little bit different. The point is, yes, it can be financed if there's profit. Because what does a lender want? They want to be paid back on their loan, but they also want good collateral. So if you're buying it good and the price is a fair price and there's some profit, my guess is, and I'm just, I don't know anything about this particular property, but my guess is that if you sold them all off, there should be a fair amount of profit at the end. And if that's your strategy, Mike, if they're a rental, it's hard to know because you have to dig into what are the 25 townhomes rent for, what are the operating expenses, what's the hard money going to cost you, all that kind of stuff. So it's basically boils down to math. But the answer on getting it financed is yes, you can definitely get it financed if it's a good deal for the lender and for you. And they're going to look at what's called a debt coverage ratio, which is the maximum amount of loan that they're going to give you for that. But if there's $1 million of profit in there, my guess is you should be able to finance that.
So we have to, okay, so Delta D on YouTube right now is in the shower watching this. You want to let us know he's in the shower, and he has a question, and we have to answer it because he's in the freaking shower watching our show, right? That's dedication.
Yeah.
So he is looking to move to North Idaho and wants to know what your take is on the mad prices there.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, welcome from the shower. So North Idaho is just overcooked, in my opinion. It's probably not a good. The good news about North Idaho is that it's a really small market, and what I mean by that is typically smaller markets that rise quickly also fall quickly. Now, I don't know when, but I was just there 3 weeks ago. I own a home there. As you guys know, I've spent my last 15 years in Northern Idaho. I do know the markets. I've met with hundreds and hundreds of really smart real estate people there. It's really, really difficult right now. And what's happening is a lot of the locals are being priced out and they're not happy. So again, back to the service workers, the people that are used to paying $500, $600, $700, $800 in rent. Those days are long gone. So, we've had rapid price increases and rapid rent increases. There's no question you're going to have massive rent increase there for the next foreseeable future. So if you can find something that cash flows, and there are deals out there. I'm just not a single family guy, but there's plenty of deals out there that do cash flow a little bit. I just talked to my friend's son, Hunter, who's buying some rental properties right now, and they're cash flowing $300 or $400 a month.
But you are skeptical on how the prices are going to do long term in Northern Idaho.
Yeah, but again, but the rental market I think is going to do really well. Yeah. So you could buy something at $500,000 or $600,000, let's say, and it could potentially cash flow. I still think you'll have that cash flow, but could it correct? Yes. Could the price be that? 8-10 years from now, yes. So if you're, but you're still covered with your rent. So especially if you have fixed rate debt. So you just got to make sure if you're, again, trying to buy for a capital gain strategy, that might not be the market you want to look at.
And the last question we're going to answer here is for Polly. So Polly on YouTube, she's in a dilemma, and I feel like we should give her a little bit of advice. Okay. So her tenant pays late every month. And she came to find out that her tenant and her husband applied for the rental and they used her husband's salary and everything else. Well, come to find out the guy living there is not her husband. So she wants to know, is she able to terminate the lease based on the fact that the person that they applied to live there is not living there?
Yeah. So yes, yeah. If you have, you have people that are living in your unit. Depends on your lease. It all goes back to that. But if you have, just like anything else, like you can't sublet. So you can't. I can't sublet. I can't rent something and then have somebody else move in behind me. So the whole idea is to have the people on the lease need to be able to pay you. So you have, it all goes back to the lease though. What does the lease say? What is I don't know what state you're in. Does that answer the question?
It does answer the question.
Okay.
So basically, because they lied on the application and it's not the real person living there, you do have a legal authority.
Yeah, absolutely, positively. That's just fraud.
Right, exactly. So we're going to end on the note. Jen's tenant story on YouTube is, my tenant wants me to cut down all the trees because the squirrels are teasing her dog.
That's awesome.
And we're just going to end there. We're just going to end right there and let you guys.
So, okay, guys, let's see if you could top that.
Yeah, try to top that.
That's
one.
a pretty good one.
All right, guys. Well, we'll see you next week. Remember, we have the handout, kenmcelroy.com/21 keys. And see you next Monday.
Cheers. Enjoy your week.